A space has to evoke an emotion, right? You as the designer have control of those emotions that are going to be evoked in whatever spaces that you design.
There's something about the way that we inhabit space and the way we nest in. We're weird little animals, we collect things. It's kind of different when I think about it that way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Architecture Beyond podcast. Today we're talking about interiors in architecture, and we have two guests for this panel. Senior interior designer at E.O.A, Lorraine Ensley, with a great background from being around the world, bringing that into her designs. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Jerica Banks, founder, director at J. Michelle, Interiors by J. Michelle, as well as a founder of Black Arteriors. So we can find out more about that. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. So this is a panel, and what we're going to do is talk about pretty much the role of interiors with architecture, with interior architecture, something that maybe some architects might overlook, or maybe if you have an architecture department that's just for interiors, the idea is maybe it's something that people don't address. At the same time, some people are fully into the interiors while they design spaces. So the questions are designed to get some insight from experience, interior designers as well as interior architects, and just get that discussion going and really bring out new comments to that. So I'm going to go ahead and start and pretty much you can introduce yourself. This first question, I feel that it's going to really just get the topic started. Where does the spark for design begin? I guess can start.
Where does the spark for interior design begin, or just design in general?
It could be design, it could be interiors. I think you have won the right to say design, and then let us, go from there.
I'll go. I feel like it's definitely a within thing, and I personally, from my personal experience, I just have always been like a creative. And so I got into interior design, though, just because I had close people in my family, like my grandmother and things like that were in design. And so I kind of picked up those attributes from her. And then it just kind of led on into me getting into interior design myself. But it's almost like a need. I felt like I wanted to help someone, but outside of I don't want to go to school to be a doctor, or but how can I help people in a way that's creative, that really speaks to who I am as an individual and a creative. So that's kind of where my spark for design started.
I didn't get as lucky. I didn't know anybody that was a designer, and honestly I didn't see that as a career path until I was already in school. So I had originally intended to go for architecture, actually. And at the last minute, I found an interiors program, and I thought, okay, that seems logical. I'll start on the inside of the building, and then I'll go to the outside, because you should, know both. But I loved it so much, that I didn't really want to learn more about the shell and the structure. I was happy where I was. My spark for design, I think I read this really cool quote the other night, actually, and it was talking about creativity, because they were trying to find a metric to measure where that comes from in people. And the researcher was saying that it's not an inherent thing, and it has nothing to do with IQ. He was saying it's actually to do with somebody's habit of learning to play. So I think that my spark is often from when it's really hard in the context of having a work day where you have actual pressure and deadlines, and there's a lot of, I think, ways that we also measure ourselves by our work, how well we're performing or doing this and that. And all of those things put pressure on our ability to act childlike and be playful and experiment. But my spark is usually when I push all those things back, and then it invites this clear space for those weird ideas to come in. That's usually where, I don't know about you all, but that's usually where I'll hear the story. You're just thinking oh, that's kind of like a kite, and this could be you start to stitch it together, and then the first time you tell somebody, starts to make sense. So I feel like you can feel it too. You feel
Wow.
like this protective kind of like it's almost a baby idea, and you like have to grow it.
Wow. I like the diversity of perspective, because the idea is it a service? Is it a creative art moment? Is it random that someone brings in? At the same time, is it something that's engineered? I think we're not actually for the engineering perspective, because the engineers are also designers, but they're designers in a different way. So to see the interiors from that perspective is very interesting. I want to continue a little bit on that. Also, I'm interested. Lorraine, you're also a recipient of the Dongi Award. I
Yeah,
hope that's spelling correct. Donghia. If you could talk a little bit about that.
you
I know
got
that
it.
does that impact some ideas for interior?
No, but it definitely reduced my student loans.
Okay, okay,
I mean, I'll put it this way. I highly recommend that any student in interior that's pursuing interior design degree from an accredited college look into it, because it's a great. I think it is the largest interior design scholarship in the States. It's a really great one to know about, because I think part of it is that the candidate pool is small. I was really lucky. My college
sure.
happened to know the professors that were there knew about it. But it's awesome. I mean, you submit, and Donghia was started, the Donghia Foundation, from their textile company,
Okay,
and Angelo Donghia was a very famous, incredible designer. So the foundation was made in his name. But yeah, they still produce amazing work. And when I do get to specify really nice textiles, I would
that,
go there. But
that's cool.
I work in the commercial side of things, so it's a little more challenging. But yeah.
Um, um, I guess Jerica, you're more. I think we worked together more in residential. I think with culture. So I work with culture, architecture, design. I'm trying to figure out, when you start your studio, I guess, how does that impact your perspective on design?
By starting my own design.
Yeah,
How
it's
does how,
sort of like I worked with a startup. A lot of architects will start with working on homes. Like a friend wants to design a home, or I guess, could you talk about a little bit that sort of beginning point for
well,
your
actually,
practice?
in commercial interiors for 12
Okay.
years before I started. I've been in design for 12 years, I'm sorry, but I worked
Hmm.
in commercial interiors for the first 10 and a half, somewhere in there, before I started. So I started out out of design school, and I kind of went right into residential.
Okay.
And because I thought that was what I wanted to do. And I just was like, I want to do residential. And I feel like a lot of design students are in that space. Like, you feel like you want to just get out of design school and do these extravagant houses for all these extravagant people. And the reality of it is, when what I found, that when I'm as a residential designer working for someone else, the income wasn't as, what you expect. And so you're doing all these extravagant projects, and you're being this workhorse for someone else. And so I kind of, after working in that for about 2.5 years, I got out of that and I got into commercial interiors. I moved back to Nashville because I had moved back to Alabama after design school. And then when I did that, I got into some commercial interiors, and I worked at a place out east. I worked for them for about 4.5 years, and then I moved to I worked on the corporate side for Staples. Like, so they were headquartered out of I can't even remember where they were headquartered out of, but they had a satellite office in Brentwood. And so I worked there for about 4.5 years too. And that's how I got into the commercial side. So it kind of let me see balance in what I wanted to do, because I wanted to make all the mistakes and all the everything else on everybody else's dime. But I always knew that eventually I wanted to branch out on my own. And so, like, after the pandemic happened, and our workload, they cut our workload to like 50%. So I then launched my own business, and I did go back to residential, because I knew if I could, do residential and have my own firm, that I could bring in the income that I felt would be, would balance out in like how it would be if I was working commercial. So what I did was start my own, and then I kind of kept it going until Staples actually they got rid of their design department. So they went out of business with their design. So I was like, okay, here I am, and I just been doing it full time ever since, and it's really worked out. So now I just do focus on residential, and I do some small scale hospitality projects too. I've done a couple of restaurants and things around town. I actually worked with Culture when I was with my last dealer after I left Staples. There was a brief moment that I went somewhere else, and then I decided, like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just going to do my own thing. And so there was another dealer that I went to in that transition, and that is when I worked with Culture on a couple of projects. So yeah.
Culture Architecture Design is an architecture firm I work with. They do from residential to commercial to stadiums to and the idea is architecture. We have it's like yes, I've done entirely residential to now seeing commercial, and the idea is it's a mix. Each one has its different, like a different child, different emotion to it. I have the next question where I'm finding out if you could help name the quintessentials of a well-crafted space. And I'm avoiding going into the interiors architecture because ideas. Sometimes we like to both say the word space. How do you differentiate? Lorraine, if you start this one.
What are the attributes of a well-crafted space? I feel like that is why I found design and why I pursued it, was because, my childhood was wild. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I feel like a lot of it was spent escaping the house or just going off to like a public library. There were a lot of civic buildings that I loved to spend time in those hours after school, or like, I just remember I have a lot of time spent kind of staring out the windows of different buildings, and those spaces had such an impact on me. And so, yeah, I wanted to give back in my own way. And I think that I've thought about this question throughout my career, because especially when I was deciding if I wanted to be interiors or architecture, because technically, like someone had to decide that the window was there for someone to be able to look through it. Someone had to plan the lighting that's ambient and you're walking through the space. Someone now realize there's so many metrics that we can use to measure how we experience space, the level of sound, the amount of glare. And of course, like when we look into all of the sustainability certifications, I'm really butchering my language here, but there's a lot of ways that those are now scored and can contribute to different points for WELL or for LEED. But I think what's a well-crafted space to me is a space that emphasizes natural lighting. The interior lighting that's not natural would be diffused. So we don't have it's really unnatural for human beings to experience overhead lighting directly at 8 hours of the day, because the sun is passing over us, we're experiencing shadows, things move. There's something called non-rhythmic biosensory simulation, which is a huge mouthful of words, but it's like it's being able to see.
Bring out a dictionary.
I don't even know why I remember that,
That's a good word.
But it's describing like water caustics when the light plays against water. And I think a well-crafted space allows you to experience those things while keeping you conditioned indoors. But the lighting that's artificial, is still mimicking that. I think level of noise has to do with programming, like what are you using the space for? But those are the things I'm usually most sensitive to. And then, you get color and texture and all those other things, but I think people might be surprised that sometimes that stuff is secondary. At times, too, I think that I've walked into a space that has a lot of volume in its aesthetics, meaning it's really loud and bright, or there's something really, intentional going on aesthetically. And sometimes I wonder if that's a distraction from those really basic elements that help make us feel a way in a space. But I don't really know. I'm going to kick it over to the other expert. Go ahead.
A lot of what she said, I mean, all of what she said, I agree to. So she focused more on, I would say, like, the actual building. I do a lot of furniture. So, but
That's awesome.
I agree that that was going to be my top thing I was going to say was, for me personally, it would be a space has to evoke an emotion, right? So that is, you as the designer have control of those emotions that are going to be evoked in whatever spaces that you design. So, as where the consumer or your client looks at it on those secondary layers, which is the furniture and the texture and the elements that you add on the back end, we as the designer are supposed to go in and, how is this space going to function? So it has to function for my client. It has to create and evoke an emotion for their everyday living. How does this space make them feel? Right. And so to do that, you have to start with, okay, what in spaces that I enjoy makes me feel a certain way or evoke a certain emotion. So for me, that is natural light, starting out with really a blank canvas and layering lighting. So being able to demonstrate how I layered this lighting. What is this space going to look like at 10 p.m.? What is it going to look like at 10 a.m.? How does the colors and textures play a role in that? What is the lighting going to do, and how is that going to change these colors as the day progresses, that kind of thing. So whereas the everyday consumer looks at that on a very plain, oh, let's just make this space pretty. I go into this space and let's just make this space functional. Let me think of the bigger picture. Like, if I take all the furniture out of this space, can someone still come in and say that this is a well designed space? Because I thought of window placement. I thought of, putting dimmers on the lighting so I can create certain tones and throughout the day. So just thinking of it in that way, and people want to stuff all of their ideas into one space, and it's actually, I love to use this quote all the time. Like, people love, oh, I want to be like, I see a lot of new designers do this, or students, because I also teach at Belmont. But they try to put all of their ideas in one space. And I'm like, a really good, well executed design, you can take one of those ideas and play off that, and that be your whole concept. You don't have to put all of your ideas into one space. And it's actually harder to eliminate some of those things and edit down to a very good, successful design versus, oh, I
Mm.
put all of my ideas. And so when I'm walking into this space, I'm like, oh, okay, what is this? And what is that? Like, you're all over the place instead of having one strong, design concept that's going to evoke that emotion that you're really going for.
Gosh, that's such a good philosophy for life.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can apply that to
So,
so
right.
much. That's so good.
I like, literally, when you think of it that way, I want, every time I'm like, I'm about to be a minimalist. I'm about to throw away. I'm going to have, we have
Hmm.
three people in this house. I'm going to have 4 cups,
Throw
Mm.
one of them out.
yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So it makes
Sure.
you really think,
Yeah,
like, what do you really need? Do we
yeah,
need a ton of plastic cups and all that? We don't really need
Sure.
that. If you
Sure.
really, what is going to get the job done? Like, you don't need all that
yeah.
extra. So
Actually,
kind of a,
and
Yeah.
I know you've got another question, Bennett, but I really want to say
No, go
something
ahead.
on this because it's such a
Sure.
good point. And I think some of the sentimentality we have with things we experience in space comes from like that choice. We live in a world full of too many choices. And there's a lot of research that shows the more
Mm.
choices you have, the less content you are with what you choose.
hmm
So like that's the principle of a store like Aldi. Their merchandising design was based on eliminating that stress. But
hmm
it's so true what Jerica just said because when you give people, I thought about what you needed and I'm holding up my earphones. I gave you this option and this is what you use for that. And that's when you start to have a relationship with the things around you, not when you have four different thoughts.
yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. To say quintessential versus maybe core or fundamental. I feel that that's the question everyone might have, and either in a school or practice. Like, they'll have a way to do things, but at the same time, in your heart, where does, and then at the same time, where does that hit with reality from theory? I will go to the next question, but that, again, play out the ideas, because I feel that this is, again, some interior ideas to people who might practice a lot of interior design, or maybe they just have said, okay, what's happening in the other room there? After we lay it out, the ideas, it's not finished there. I guess, imagine a dream space, the type that holds the most potential. What does it look like? Like, what would you say is a
Jerica,
dream
do you want to?
space?
I'm gonna
Either
hit that one
to
first
begin.
because I don't think I don't know. I think
Okay.
everything could be a dream space. I don't know.
Yeah, that is a very broad question, but for me, a dream space would probably be just a blank canvas, very neutral. I am a monochromatic queen. Like, I want everything white and creams. As you can see, I'm in my dining room and that's all I got behind me. So really natural light. I could live this. Okay, if I had an ideal room, I could live in a space that had, I love my bedroom. It has a whole entire wall of windows. So ton of windows, hard surface floors, white walls, high ceilings, and put a nice comfy chase lounge in the center of it. And I can look at nature all day.
Yeah.
Treed,
Yeah.
a little bit of peak of water. That for me is an ideal space and blank canvas that I could just be such a creative in. Like that is literally all I personally need.
Such a nice visual.
I mean,
I
like huge picture window
So,
wall.
so you like start blank canvas,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of like saying, if you're working with an project with an architect, how would you navigate that one? Because the idea is, if someone is giving you a dream space, do you like take the drawings you already have and just empty it out and start from there? Is that
I
is that
mean,
the way to
we're
making a dream space?
not at all. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of joy in collaboration because it's just like getting in the playground with other kids and just, making things together. But we do in interiors, I think that is a common misconception because we have a lot of background in programming, and that's a lot of our strong suit. So much of our education focuses too on like we're probably the most impacted by codes because we're containing people in rooms. We have to consider piracy, and there's a lot that overlaps with architecture. But when we're practicing both in residential and commercial, it's you do have to toggle with those restraints. So in a lot of ways, I mean, we have the capability to do the programming, and when I say that, I mean laying out the space, moving the walls, considering the structure, which we continue to do throughout construction documents. But when I think of a dream space, I'm kind of like, yeah, that is such a beautiful open question. I visually saw myself go lay myself over the lounge when Jerica was describing that space because I mean, that's very dreamy, and I would say there's no dream space or dream project for me because I've been surprised by the things that I feel endeared towards. There's there's totally ratchet and insane like rooms in my mom's best friend's house that and I hope she never listens to this and thinks I think that her taste is wild, but it's stuff that I personally may not have ever made a choice about, even the spaces themselves. But there is something about the way that we inhabit space and the way we nest into it. We're weird little animals. We collect things, we put them in our little holes, and then we live in them. And it's kind of different when I think about it that way. Maybe that's also where residential and commercial they do start to consider the same things. It's just we don't get the same level of intimacy, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of something we can be jealous about, because it's a different way to touch people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, the collaboration aspect of the dream space will. It's like the same thing for like if someone has brought an idea, like some clients, they'll come with a plan, and though it's lovely when they come with. I like the idea of having Pinterest
I was gonna
and them
say,
inspired by that.
gotten so inspired by it and share with. Oh,
But if when they have a full plan that's super developed and it's like you have the idea is like it's their first house. So like the idea is that's something that needs to guide them. But at the same time, if you work with an international hotel brand who has like an entire catalog to to go through, it's like that doesn't make it any better point of contact for that project, because each project is in a different site, is in a different set of contexts and demands. So it's interesting to consider that, because a dream space is it the dream to work on, like the box, or is it like a dream in design? It's interesting to hear that perspective, or just have that insight. I would say those are some good answers. The idea is it's like you ask an architect, and maybe someone likes. We have a lot of superstars in our world that like maybe Zaha Hadid or Norman Foster. And the idea is like, have you ever been inside the actual space of that? That actually starts a different conversation, because maybe someone doesn't like Zaha's house, but the idea is if you found some interiors, like you would say, I know it exactly. It's not just an object. I guess considering that process and the process for the interior, maybe to craft it, what are the first steps that you would recommend to create that perfect space? And what finishing touches absolutely need to be involved? Anyone up for that one?
So you're saying this perfect space for a client, or you're saying the perfect space that I created in my, like, where are we going?
It could be for the client for sure. The idea is, maybe I guess I will leave that to your discretion. The idea is you do in some sense design for yourself and then design for the client, or how does that connect with your process?
We can talk about the client, because this myself is a madhouse, and it's not my forte. I'm like so good for everybody else, but when it comes to myself, I'm like,
forget about it. Yeah.
Like, I need to hire my own designer. My husband's like, it's so crazy that it's like that. I'm like, you don't understand. You wouldn't understand that you just don't understand. So let's talk about the client. So of course, with the client, that all starts in the programming phase of design. Like, what are we going to use this space for on an everyday basis? That's what I want to know. Don't come to me telling me how you want blue walls right off. Like, I want to know, how are you going to function in this space every day? What are things that you do every single day and that you're going to be using this space for? Is this going to double as an office space for you? Do you have kids? What is your everyday life like? Do you entertain? Like, I ask questions like that. I have a whole list of questions. I have a 20-minute consultation call with every client before I even start on their project. And I want to know everything about their everyday lifestyle, because I can't create an ideal space if I don't know what you do on a daily. It's just going to be a pretty space. Yeah. And that's what I do. Fortunately, I am a designer, and you hired me for a reason. So I'm not here to make your spaces pretty. I'm here to make them function for you. And then we can add the pretty layers, what you call pretty layers, later, the secondary part of it. So that's what I feel like a lot of decorators and, all that, they get lost in making things pretty. But like, I'm not gonna put placemats and plates on your dining room table to be staged. That's not everyday life. I'm at my dining room table right now. It would have been a mess if I would have had to move all that stuff out of the way. Like, I don't set the dining room table until it's time to be set, or we're about to have a dinner. How are you going to function on that table every day? Not just 3 days out of the year. I use my table to work. So I want comfortable dining chairs. I don't want something that's just pretty. Like, that's knowing all the depth of what they're using that space for is going to create the most successful design, which they're going to end up loving. I don't want things that are just going to be pretty, that are not going to function, that you're going to have to replace in 2 years. None of that. How are you using this space? Tell me, let's start there. And that's kind of where I start my design process, how they use their lifestyle on a daily. And that's what I feel separates us, meaning designers and architects and all of these creatives that have taken the time to study people. You have to really study your clients and study people before you can execute a well executed design.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like that's too, like sociology was a big part of our undergrad because it just has to be, you have to understand. I think in architecture there is a huge overlap between the two degrees, but one of them is also watching observations in public space, the way that
Mm-hmm.
people, if you put a bench somewhere, people will go sit on it, but not if you do this. And
Right.
there's a lot that has been studied about those relationships, so much of which just stimulated a ton of thoughts. Because I couldn't agree more. I mean, there is no. I think what's hard about doing a design for yourself, which I think is totally universal. I don't know a single person that's creative that thinks that they can do what they do for other people for themselves, because in a lot of ways we're learning, we're almost like discovering with the client what the real needs are. And if they come with an expectation or the idea already solved, that eliminates the design process that's so critical. It's like me walking into therapy and saying, I know what my problem is. Like, it's this. And then it's like, and then my therapist would be like, if you know what your problem is, then why are you coming to see me? You could do it
Yes.
yourself. But the thing is, it is like this awesome discovery process that requires other people's help. And I don't think I have like a supremely better taste than anyone particularly. There's people that don't practice design that have incredible taste. But if this was based on people having taste, it wouldn't be a profession.
Right.
And it is a profession. And I think that is kind of to what Jerica just said about decorators and ornamentation. We, for me, like I look at the timeline of interiors, like we're talking Billy Baldwin and Elise de Wolf, but
Mm-hmm.
way historical. That began as like ornamentation. It was also a frivolity, like from an upper class that could afford to just be kind of doing for frou, and they could afford to have those interiors. And I think that inherently made it something that's kind of classist. But now today, the way that the practice works is so different because there used to be so much money and time to build incredible buildings, and an architect could do it all because a famous Ludwig Mies van Barrow, like they could sit there and they could design everything, and then they did, and it was expensive, and they only had really upscale clients, and the bank was willing to pay for it. Today, we have to pull something out in 2 years. We've got to get it in budget. We don't have time for all that. So necessarily, like we have two different factions, and the way that, like, I would say the way that MP&E, for anybody listening, we should all know, like mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the way that those things have evolved and the way we interface with them has changed so much about how much we have to pay attention to AV, even to the extent that there's separate factions now branching off. There are acoustic designers, there are acousticians, there are lighting designers, there are established degree paths for these things as they evolve. But we're in a later stage of evolution, I would say, and it has changed a lot. But when I hear often when you introduce yourself at a party, I don't know, Jerica, if you've had this experience, but it's like, oh, what do you do? Interior design or interior architecture? And then it's immediately, oh, I need your help. You need to come over. And it's like, it's really wild because people assume, one, that you have an interest in working for free, two, that you're going to practice residential design, or three, that like, that's how this works because you're creative. But really, it's a lot different than HDTV. There's been a lot of, yeah, go for it.
Oh, I was just saying, like, everyone isn't your client either. That's not how
Yeah.
you don't know if you need me. You don't
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
work I do. You don't know what I specialize. I don't know what you need. I'm really big on that. Like, not saying yes to every project, because that takes the creativeness out of it, right? You can't say yes to everyone isn't your client, and I'm okay with accepting that. You don't know if you need me as your designer, if you're just meeting me at a party and you think I got on a cute outfit, and like, just because I can put my look together doesn't mean that I could put a space together in the way that you would,
So
like.
the dream client or the dream space is connected a little more to dream client because a person or maybe a set of demands that will not reduce to a dream space. It's like that project is like, it's not really, that's another, that's sort of how you would
It's like
that's part of my second part of the question. How do you finish the space?
It's like a
And
dream user, which is I guess that's how
okay,
you finish space. But I'd say it's a dream user. Like I love projects for the public. I love projects for I mean I don't know. And Jerica's probably a little bit closer too because it's like we think about people with so much intention. We have to move a supply grill because it might blow on someone while they're sitting in a booth that we place there. You know, we think about the level of noise that might come if we don't put a door on that, and doesn't need one for code, but we should probably put it on there. We think about whether or not, you know, someone's going to feel a sense of privacy if we enclose them in this way and not that way. But I don't know. I think like the finishing touch is like, does the person that uses your space feel cared about intensely?
Mhm.
I don't know.
I feel like that like dead on. I actually don't have much to say after. I mean, if you're designing a space with intention and you're the designer working on that space for that client, I feel like you have to be intentional with everything you do. They'll notice it. It's such a like I personally when I get done with the project and I'm done, like we're on to the next thing. What I like to hear from my clients is I would have never thought of that, but I use that all the time.
okay,
Or, you know, like that is just like, well, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to think of the things that you wouldn't think of because if you could think of them, you wouldn't have hired me. And so
sure,
you have to really, really think about all the stuff that these everyday consumers, and if we want to just flip to like, you know, commercial and hospitality, they don't know about codes. They don't
Yeah.
know about 10% of their seating in a waiting room has to be bariatric. Like, how can we make that look seamless, right? How can we make that look universal versus like that's an ADA requirement? They don't know that. They just want to go buy some chairs from Wayfair, fill the waiting room up, and be done. So you, as the professional, have to go in listening to, like I said, how are we using this space every day? How's this space going to function? And then take those things. You don't have to even tell them that's why you did it. You do it because you're the professional. You know those codes. You know what the requirements are. So you just go in and you do that. And it's in, you know, most trained and good designers, it's going to be like a universally designed space anyways. And it's just going to blend in seamlessly. And you're not supposed to know. That's what universal design is. Like we
mm,
want these people to feel and occupy and use these spaces to the best of its potential and it be seamless. I don't
Yeah.
want it to be a person that has an ADA requirement or whatever to walk in a space and feel any different from the next person, right? So I want it's just this is the way that the design was made. It wasn't
mm.
designed for a specific user type. It was designed. It was just a well executed design.
That's going from the theoretical to the professional. The professional theoretical is it's good to have the theoretical bit in the starting of it to understanding
Mhm.
psychology, but finishing it has some real implications. You know
Right.
that's where the science of the codes are dominated by science, and
Right.
so that's for sure how that would not be something you would want to start someone who wants to be more creative. Like,
Yeah.
the door has to be this high.
I mean, I don't know because
It could be.
sometimes different people, some people get excited by a blank page. Some people get really excited by knowing you can have 4 lines on this page. And it's, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it's good to know what your boundaries are because if the handle of the door can only be so high, what does that mean if you
Hmm.
want to do that, you know?
Well, I mentioned designing for yourself because I was actually thinking of noted American architect Frank Lloyd Wright, who's always made doors his height, and like he's sort of short, and everyone else always has a hard time getting in his buildings.
He and
um, yeah,
the one metric, Corbusier,
it could be yes, his That's you use your body to understand it, but at the same time, it has to be, there's that element of theory is like, oh, I designed for me, but reality is I have to understand other people. I have a second tier of questions where now we're talking about a little more practical and industry. Um, I'll start that off with if you could define the role of interior designer versus the interior architect, because that's a good starting point to break into the architecture versus interior design question.
Do you mind, Jerica, do you mind if I hop on that real quick?
I want
I have some thoughts. Thought about this a lot. Because I think with the confusion around the term, so we have a title that is not protected. So in order to have the title of architect, you need to be licensed. We have a title act in certain states, and our advocacy groups like IIDA and ASID do advocate per state. So in Texas, you can't call yourself an interior designer unless you are a licensed CIDQ and CIDQ previously. Tennessee, I don't think we are currently. I don't think we've gotten our title act yet, but I've been signing my name on that petition since I was in school. So it's weird the way that these things work. But if you, for example, sometimes I have to think about it too in the way that the world describes this work, because, for example, in German it would be you're an interior architect. But if you were to say you're an interior designer, you're saying interior decoration, that they are distinctive in what they practice. Whereas here it's kind of hard. I would almost say that the modern practice, the licensed practice of interior design, is interior architecture by necessity. You can't get around if you've been licensed, you have to know the same things that would make you responsible for maintaining codes and protecting human health and safety. Period. But I think what's confusing is that there's there used to just be degrees in interior design. Now there's degrees in interior architecture. But if you look at the credit hours, the difference between them is it's not actual. There might be more layering of a different flavoring of this or that, but we all had the same hours of building systems classes. We all had the same foundational education. And that's just because we all had to be if you were in an accredited institution, that was just the groundwork, and that's been the case for a long time. But I think there's some sensitivity around it because there's a diminutization that happens with interior design. I think both in the profession and outside of the profession, where we think of it as like this lighter, pretty even, like ornamentation. And I remember I was still a student. I'll end it with this, but I had gone to this continuing education unit. I went to CEU. I didn't need it, but I was just there to be in the world. And there was an older designer who worked for a local company that's really well established. I could probably mention it, Earl Swenson. And she started crying because we were talking about pain points in the industry. We were talking about the title acts. This was foundational in me learning about this at the time. But she started crying because she was saying, I work just as hard as my colleagues. I work just as hard as some lawyers I know. And I have friends that work in healthcare that I work just as hard as them, and the work I'm doing is just as important. And for some reason, the way that we're regarded and the work that we're doing is not seen that way. And I mean, I've come to understand so much of what she meant since then, especially going into the profession. But it's unfortunate. It's our responsibility to advocate continually. But I never want that to be presented in a way that diminishes what other people are doing, because if somebody is a really talented decorator, they're actually better at that than I am. And I think when I was younger, I thought that what I was doing was somehow better than, that. And I've tried to look at that internally, because I think that there's a place for all of us doing the things we do. Does it make it confusing for the public? Yes. Is it hard to work with a client that has no idea why you're in the room and they're like, I don't need an interior designer, or you're having to talk to a contractor that thinks you don't understand what a stud is, or how it should be spaced in a wall, or how deep it needs to be to put a toilet with a wall carrier in it. But those are the things that we maybe have to take on personally. I just think that I've come to appreciate all our sprinkled differences. To answer your question, I think interior design and interior architecture are synonymous most of the time, but I think there's still a role for those stagers, decorators. Those people are really valuable and important, and their work is beautiful. I'd love to see everybody get empowered, but that includes us in the profession. I don't know. I have so much on that thought. Go
Ah,
take it away, Jerica.
it was so good and just so well thought out. Like I have no comeback. It was like she spelled
it's
it out in
it's
every
not a debate, but I mean
I've
it can
stewed
be.
on this for so long.
way. I've said every single thing just mentioned has come out of my mouth at some point. So I mean, she's really dead on. I feel like it's just I'll just take it right to the end because she said everything that I wanted to say in the beginning. So yeah, I feel like it's a space for all of them. I've had people come to me. It's actually like that. I get so many DMs and so many emails from like random people that want to be. I want to be a designer. I want to be like, what do I have to do? Do you think I have to go to school for? Do I go to school for that? And like, I get that all the time. It's like probably I get more inquiries about that than I do
Service.
clients with new projects probably. And I always ask, what is it that you want to do? What do you want to do? Do you want to make people's bedrooms look pretty the rest of your life, or homes, or like, is that all you want to do? And I give a straight up answer. I'm like, you are just a creative then. You're just a creative person. We need people like you too. It's okay that you just know how to make the sofas and beds and all those extra layers look good. Like that is needed too. It's some interior designers that are not interested in that at all. It's interior designers that are not interested in furniture at all. There's so many different vertical markets in interior design that it's so when people come to me and they tell me that's all they want to do, they don't care about the well-being of the people that are occupying spaces, then I tell them, no, you don't have to go to school for that. You don't have to go to school to make spaces beautiful. But if you want to be the next designer designing all the Starbucks around the United States, oh, you better carry your butt to school. You're not going to get those type of jobs.
Yeah. Or the cool restaurant that you find so inspiring.
Right. Yeah. Or the the next Grand Hyatt, or
Well,
Omni, or Four Seasons, or designing the next cruise ship for the Four Seasons. You're not going to get that kind of job. But if you just want to, stage homes and things, no, you don't have to go to school for that. So I'm like so honest when it comes to people asking me that question, because they just automatically assume I'm going to push school because I'm a teacher. I teach. I'm an instructor at Belmont, and I am a designer. Like, it's not what I'm about. I'm about advocating for us as a profession. Like I stand behind us 1000% when it comes to advocating for designers. But when it comes to, hey, I just want to be a creative and I just want to make spaces beautiful, you're not my competitor. Like, I don't feel any competition or any threat from you, because I know when push comes to shove, when big players come into play, I'll get the job over you because it's just because of my educational background, like, so it's no competition with it. It's like you said, it's space for us all. But I think that interior architecture and interior design, I honestly think they're on the same. I'm with her. I think they're in and of the same. I had always been confused about it, like, because my degree, it's a bachelor of fine arts, in interior design. So,
Same.
yours too. Okay, cool.
Same. Yeah.
I mean, I just know when I thought of when that was kind of came along. It started coming along like probably when I was about to graduate, and like that's when I kind of started hearing about interior architecture. I was like, what is that? So I'm like, okay, they take some interior design classes and they take some architecture classes. Like I kind of like got into more detail of it. But when I think of it, if I were before I've done my research, I'm like, oh, it's an interior designer that focuses more on the architecture maybe than the interior design, like that. I mean, but I honestly feel like it's in and of the same. I feel like it's kind of whatever the institute wants to name the degree. They
Yeah.
literally had board discussions with all the instructors at Belmont whether they wanted to change like the name. We've had what do you want? feel like it should be a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree? Do you think it should be like
Bachelor of Science.
Bachelors of Science? Like
Yeah.
all these different things, and like they want to talk about changing the names and things of it. So I just kind of, I
The
feel
well,
like,
the architecture equivalent is definitely architect versus designer, residential designer, because for sure there are penalties. I was working with an architect who was not licensed, and so the idea is if he couldn't put architect anywhere on his website, even though we were trained architecture, so it's like until we had the licensure that we could have all the skills. The idea is it's something that protects the trade,
Yeah.
and the
It
idea
also,
is
it's a legal thing too. Sorry, I didn't mean to step
it's
on
the
your
court.
sentence. I get
Sure.
so, I sit and stew on this for, I'm just kidding, but
passionate.
I've thought about this so much. And I share Jerica's passion because I believe in our industry. I believe in what we easy, and no, not just anybody can do it. Having sat for exams, like it is not a cakewalk at all, but I think too, this might be kind of controversial to say this, but I think that there are some roots that would be worth investigating when we consider why it's so critical that we differentiate our profession because of what it's doing to injure the profession. And also when we talk about the fact that it's mostly comprised of women and that's changing. And, it used to be women and the occasional gay man. And I happen to feel very lucky to work with a straight man who studied interior design and is a great designer. And I love to see that because I think that that's been a hard thing.
That's unfortunate. That's another conversation of stereotypes.
Yeah.
Because my school, Pratt, I went to, that's actually a very large interior design department that happens to be like 50% Korean, if it like 75% women, and it's like the idea is it's like uh, part of the architects they might not understand what interior architecture is, but I've met and understood, and that's even why to show this, it's not just something I'll do partly, but it's a full trade that brings to the life of architecture. And the idea is it could function totally without architects. The idea of obviously for either a renovation or just a
10,000 square
space.
feet.
Yeah. We've architects actually can design like small churches or house, or like a designer can design a small church or house. The idea is without the license. So the idea is the license is definitely where you make your bed with an industry. Like, okay, like myself being a licensed in architecture, you yourself being a licensed interior designer. At the same time, you have that division. That's a very great conversation point. I love the insight that's provided, and also the idea, the conversation that some people don't have in school
Yeah.
to know that difference.
Yeah.
The idea is there's so many questions. I love the conversation. I think I'll head into my sort of third set of questions, where it's really about really some insight to young interior designers or young architects, maybe in school, maybe not, trying to choose their direction. What would you advise them? What's the most important thing for them before they've made their choice? Either
Jerica.
start.
Whether to go for interior design or architecture.
Yes, to make the decision. It's definitely about the interiors, opportunity with interiors, because ideas I would, my first year of program, people are saying, okay, maybe, like everyone shouldn't just say, oh, I'm going to be this type of architect, that type of architect. They might not be an architect, they might be interior designer, they might be product designer. But if someone what would you help someone who you would say that person has a future in interior design? What would you advise for them? What's the best thing?
So this is like a young student that just graduated high school. They're
Sure.
school for interior design. So that's where we're at. Okay.
Yeah.
It is way, way more intense than thinking. So just be prepared, because just like the standards that they have to get these universities, for if you're going to an accredited design program, be prepared to do some work, because these FIDA accredited and CETA accredited, all of that, you're gonna have to really put in some really hard work. I can remember days like crying in the studio. Like, it is that intense. It's way more, it's nothing like I thought it was going to be. Even me going into design school, I thought I was going to really learn about, you is the furniture portion is so small. That is just such a little brief little piece. You learn about the history of furniture and have like those basic classes, but like actually like you learn about space planning, but you don't go in there and learn who Bernhard is, or like you don't know that. That's stuff you find out in the industry afterwards. You really go in. You have to learn how to make a whole set of construction documents before you graduate, and every studio teaches a different level of residential. We had to hand draft, and they still make you. The first studio at O'More, which is a part of Belmont now, but it's all hand drafting. You have to know how to do that. They want those students graduating to be able to step into a space with a client and pull out a piece of trash paper and be able to, oh, let me show you, these walls are the walls that we're going to see if we can, demo these walls and sketch up a little floor plan, or, this is how this will look visually. Let me draw an elevation of this. Like, if you don't even know those terms or think that you're going to get out just making spaces look pretty, you are in for it. You have to know so many codes, and they're going to drill. If you don't know, you're literally going to you're going to have probably walk across the stage with the wheelchair radius on the top of that's
And
how
it'll be 67 inches because
right.
we're now
They changed it, right? They changed
2018.
So like it's way more technical. So just I mean, it's hard to tell an 18-year-old that, right? I mean, I have the students that I teach a class called Design Interactions, and it's so cool because we kind of covered topics about it tonight, but it talks about how people interact within space. So we go over like anthropometric data, we go over ergonomics, it goes over so many different, like universal design, ADA design, what's the difference. It covers so many different, why are the doorways 36 inches? Why are the light switches at a certain height? Like, it goes over every little small detail that you see on an everyday basis. You literally walk through your homes and these public spaces, and you never know why. But like going to design school is going to tell you the why. And so that's what separates you. That's what's going to make the difference between you and, the people out here just making things look pretty, the creatives. And so be prepared to learn that. And they really set really high expectations in these design programs now. They're very, you have to be focused. And it's going to make you such a great designer in the end if you just go in with that mindset of, okay, I already know this is going to be a strenuous program. I know I'm going to have to learn code. Take the pretty out of it, because these designers are coming out of design school with portfolios that I have literally blown my brain. They know so many technical programs and stuff that we weren't privy to, because the design programs now, they're just, I mean, once you put a little, gosh, they have so like
the competition is
like the
unreal, right?
Yeah.
Unreal. So if you're coming out on Slack in design school, and you got some students that are super focused, they want to learn all the new programs, and they're gonna be so far ahead of you. I have some students that are like, their work is just like phenomenal, like better than some work I see, firms putting out, because they're so good with the technical side of it. And that's what these firms want out there. So you got to go in and like really, like, I feel like you need to research like where you want to be after, like, okay, I want to work for E.O.A Architects. I need to be on E.O.A Architects as a freshman in college, seeing what kind of work they're doing, seeing what type of projects they're working on, and how can I apply myself to make a portfolio that I could present to them, and they can, because you're going to be it's so much competition. These students are learning so much in these programs. You're going to have to stand out. And I feel like to stand out, they're going to have to get back to the drawing board, because this AI stuff is really watering down the creativity. And they need to get back to the drawing board, do some studies, do some research, have a bomb portfolio that shows that you did build and research, that showed that you went out and researched the architects that you know, did this project, and I paid attention to all of that detail and have a I want to see variety in these portfolios. I don't want to see what room AI created for you when you said make me a cool space with natural light. I want to see how you came to this. I want to see sketches in your portfolio and handwork and how that turned into these beautiful renderings that you've created. You know, like, so it's really, they're going to have to be, I feel like you just really have to do your research of where you want to be.
It sounds like, Jerica, you're volunteering for a portfolio review.
I am like,
Just
the
the
thing that
one.
I'm just like so impressed by now. Like, I really have been thinking about going to my department chair saying, hey, I want to take over the portfolio class. Like, I feel like that is like, people are missing that, and they're just trying to go in and they put everything in their portfolio, which is also not a good thing. Like, nobody wants, I rather see 3 well executed designs versus than you having 10 projects in there and half of them aren't even worth looking at.
Yeah, photographed and not
Yeah.
scanned. I completely agree. I mean, everything that Jerica just said, I would completely agree with. I mean, it's true to experience. I mean, it is, if you are meant to do this, or I should say, like, if you love doing this, those hours that you stay awake, till 5 in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
you will cherish them and you will do it willingly. Weirdly enough, you'll be out there, with your friends that might be up like you, being crazy. I mean, and like some of us have to work all through college. I know I did, and I was going to school with people that maybe didn't have to, but we were all together doing the same thing, and it was really
Right.
cool. It's almost like you're all on a warship. But
Mm-hmm.
we lose, I mean, just like in architecture, a lot of people go in with dreams of what it might be or what they think it is. And, you know, very quickly, especially in design, I think we have people that drop out in the first year, like 75% of the class dropped out. The next year, it's like another 25%. I mean, you whittle down to, my graduating class was like 8 people. You just don't get that many survivors when you do have an accredited degree path. But I would say if someone young were to come to me and ask me if they should do this or if they should do architecture, I would just ask them, like, well, number one, a lot of programs, if they have both, like UT, you can see what they're doing and you can see what you're doing and you're in the same foundations class. But if you don't have the benefit of that, I would say that people, professionals out in the world, will always love to talk to you about this stuff. I mean, I think it's so cool that Jerica's like unofficially having to answer all these DMs, which is probably also kind of a pain because, that's time that you're taking, and this is also, not a consulting thing, but
Right.
I think we as professionals love to give back. And like, I love nothing more than a young person coming and saying, hey, could you look at my portfolio? I just got done reviewing someone's portfolio for the second time.
It's like, I
And
feel like an unofficial thing for us. Like, that's, I review somebody's portfolio every year. It's not, it never fails.
yeah, and it's a gift. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I love to support the next designers. I know how much I needed it. I needed somebody there for me at every step, and I sought it out, but I wasn't afraid to ask. I was always like hungry, and I know that sometimes there's a generational difference in how we perceive someone's willingness to show up or how hard they're going to work or whatever. But I just really appreciate anyone that wants this thing, and I think they can have it. But I would say that they can go and talk to professionals. We really encourage shadowing here at E.O.A. Like, anybody that's interested, I don't care if you're in middle school. I don't care if you are in a different degree program. I don't care if you're 40. Like, if you want to know what this is about, we have had every one of those descriptions come and shadow with us. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just a good way to see, like, the day to day. Now, we're not everyone, we're just one kind of firm.
Mm-hmm.
But man, we'll share you with our friends. We will connect you with anyone we know of. And I believe in a community that supports each other. I think we can do that. But back to this kid wanting to pursue it, like, I would just say, once you figured out if, like, day to day you could do this, just remember that if you look around the world and you don't see anybody that looks like you or seems like you or thinks like you or is designing the things you want to design, don't be discouraged, because you might need to be the person that does that thing. And the people that come behind you are going to need you to do that. And I don't know why that made me emotional. I just think it's really important that, because of what is out there, and it's changed so much. Even since I was in school, like, social media allows us to see everything that everyone's doing around the world, and we can realize that there's so much going on all at once. But if you look around and you're like, I don't know if this is for me, just because I don't want to be that kind of designer. That was me in school. I was like, I don't have the privilege of not, just having a business right out of school, or that's not even a privilege sometimes. But I knew a lot of girls whose parents were like, you just let us know when you graduate, honey, and we'll get you set up. And I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to find a job. But you just have to know that, like, if you care about it and you want it, it doesn't have to be real in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
That was so good.
I started to cheer up. I'm like,
No, that's great. Apparently, one of my neighbors somewhere just started playing like nightclub music, so I guess that's the music for. We'll have to continue maybe another panel. But you guys have been so valuable in your insight and your contribution for learning about and expressing what's happening in interiors, what makes it, where people can find you, find out more about what you do in interior design, and then.
Okay. So on social, I can be found at _designerblack, and that also has my tag for my lifestyle brand, which is a lifestyle and home decor and accessory line, which is called Black Arteriors, and that those are my 2 social handles. I do residential, small hospitality. I dabble in commercial when people take me back there, but mainly I focus on residential and hospitality.
Lorraine.
I was just following Black Arterios account.
Okay, it's working. The tag is working.
I personally don't have the same kind of social presence because I hide under the umbrella of a larger company. So you can find E.O.A. Architects website online, and there's my little bio. But in my personal social media, I'm a bit of a recluse. I have a social media handle. I don't post any photos of myself.
You're on LinkedIn, and you add it on LinkedIn as soon as you start working on projects. It's like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so, I keep my LinkedIn up for sure. Yeah, that's a good one. And then I keep my website active, which is echoenlet.weebly.com, which I don't think anybody's gonna find.
But I'll definitely DM you, and I'm gonna ask.
DM you. I'll ask you if I should become a designer, Jerica.
Thank you.
I would love that.
I believe the audience has enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my guests for joining today. This has been the Architecture Beyond podcast with your host, Brandon Gibbs. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave your comments, and also join us for the next episode. See you in the next one.